So you'd like to add a second 12-volt battery to your Prius? Well, why would anybody want to do that? There are some questions to consider. First of all, why might you want a second 12-volt battery? Where would you put a second battery? How do you anchor it? You don't want a 30-pound battery hitting you in the back of the head if you have an accident. How do you hook it up? The Prius batteries have those famous tiny battery terminals. How to charge it. And finally, how to make it look nice-ish. All right, so let's look at these questions. Why might you want a second 12-volt battery? Well, perhaps you'd like to add an auxiliary port to your Prius that's live all the time. Maybe you want to put something a little fancier in with a port and a USB charger that even shows you your voltage. Well, why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you want to put a refrigerator like a Dometic into your Prius. It'll fit nicely in the back or behind the passenger seat in the back or even in the well. Okay, so you've decided to put in a 12-volt battery, a second one. So where are you going to put your second battery? Well, in the back of the Prius, you've got a lot of space, and we know the battery is underneath the deck on the right. But how about on the left? Because on the left, you've got this little cabinet there. It's kind of wasted space. But if you take off that little lid, you will discover that there is a bin in there. And in the bin is a little plug, and you can just unscrew that with your fingers and lift that whole bin right out, and you've got a nice space. So it looks like this. Okay, next question, how do you anchor the battery? We know that Toyota anchors their batteries nicely. There's actually an anchor that goes over the top, and then there's 3 screws underneath the battery tray that hold the whole thing down very nicely. So what you really ought to do is get a battery tray. And where do you get a battery tray? They cost $38 to $40 new from a dealer. So go to a local junkyard and pick one up for maybe $10. And so you're going to use some of the space. You see the little post there that sticks up. It's going to stick up a little further than everything else. And next to that post is an interesting little rubber plug. If you pull that plug out, you will find a nice hole. Part of what I don't want to do is drill any holes in my Prius. And so I decided to use this hole as an anchor too. Unfortunately, you can't get to the other side of that, so pick up a hollow wall anchor, sometimes called a molly bolt, from a hardware store. It costs about 40 cents. I got a washer to go with it. And you pop it in there. And now you can screw a screw in there. Now, because there was a rubber plug in there and there were some signs of rust, I really ought to have put a small amount of silicone caulk in there to seal it up. But I didn't think of that until later on. Then you can get some hanger strap, which will help you tie the battery down. And I put the hanger strap over that post, that stud that sticks up, and you're going to put the battery tray hole right there into that stud. So you need to measure how long of that strap you need. So wrap it around your battery good and make sure that where the hole is at the bottom is going to match up with a big enough hole to go over that screw stud that sticks up. And wrap it around, and then you're going to stick it over the battery tray screw at the top. Okay, once you've got that cut the right length, then you can screw it down to the stud that's sticking up, and then turning it a little bit, you can put in that molly bolt. And now you've got things pretty well anchored. All right, our next question. how to hook it up with those tiny Prius battery terminals. Okay, some of us have been bringing a spare battery along without tying it down, and we're just sort of using hose clamps to anchor wires in. That's really not a great idea. So I would recommend getting real battery posts. Now, if you go to Toyota, that red plastic cover alone costs $13.27. The little gray piece that goes in there, the gray plastic terminal junction, is $33.82. The vent hose for the battery is $18.73, and I couldn't even find any prices on the negative cable. I found one website that says they're not even available anymore. Okay, if you go to a local junkyard, I got all this plus a few other parts for $20. All right, let's start with the positive side. I want to connect a few extra wires onto that. And so what I did was I just marked out a little space there and cut it so that those battery positive wires can just come right under the cover. Now, on the there's that really nifty cable that is hooked onto the positive side, and I was hoping to use that, but I couldn't figure out a good way of putting a clamp on the other end of it. And so what I did was I got some tinned copper marine grade wire. This is great because it resists corrosion. I got 4-gauge wire, and I got two of them. One is 2¼ feet long, and the other is 6.33 feet long. And I got the appropriate lugs on the ends. And I got this new from Genuine Deals. They make them custom for you for $27.46, and that included priority shipping. You can see that this stuff is for boats, which means that it can take a lot of temperature because the boats are sitting out in the sun. 105 degrees Celsius on that is 221 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can bet that this is not going to melt in your car with the heat. It's good stuff. All right, so I took off the original cable from the positive side, and I hooked up the bolt there to my cable. And now for the ground wire, you need to find something, and I just didn't want to drill any holes, and so I chose to use this hole there and use some sandpaper to polish it up good so that there's a good connection to the ground. And then I used the ground strap, and this is from the junkyard. Unfortunately, a lot of the parts of it were pretty rusted up, so I just put in new bolts. Now, there's the ground strap on there. Just a little tip. Make sure that you attach the other side of it before you slap your battery in there. It's going to be impossible otherwise. Now, this is the hose that Toyota puts on these AGM batteries so that they can vent to the outside. Why? They must have a good reason. So I decided to get one of these vent hoses. If you buy them new, they're $18, but I got it just at the junkyard along with all that other stuff. And what I did was, this picture is sort of hard to see it, but the hose is in the battery, and then I just poked it out those little vents that are on that side there. And so there you go. Okay, hook up the positive side, and everything is hooked up. Now, how do you charge this thing? Well, I decided to get an automatic charging relay from Blue Sea Systems. This combines the batteries, it parallels the batteries when there's any charging going on, and isolates the batteries when there's discharging going on, like if you're plugging in things like your refrigerator. That way you can not run down your Prius car battery, you just run down your auxiliary battery, and when you're driving, you charge them both up again. So this is what this relay looks like. I got it from Amazon for $84. It comes with a wiring diagram, and you can see on the diagram that basically what you're doing is you're paralleling your battery. So both positive sides of the battery are going to be connected, and this gives you a lot more playroom. Here's the specifications. You can read them if you want. Okay, so we open up the case on this thing. We've got a couple of lugs, and those lugs are going to hook up to battery A and battery B. It doesn't really matter which battery. It works either way. And there's a couple other things on here. You have a ground, and then there's a little tiny window up here, and that is a little indicator that shows when the batteries are paralleled together by the relay. Then there's another little connection there, which will allow you to run a wire so that you can see when it is paralleled. So I put the whole thing together down underneath the box, and it's important to connect the ground with a fuse, and I just put a 1 amp fuse in there, and then you can just ground it to there. You can get these inline fuse holders from, I don't know if Menards is a nationwide chain or not, but you can get them at various stores. I got mine for just under $3. They come with a 30 amp fuse, but the nice thing is that there's 16 gauge wire, and so it's good wire. Okay, so I stuck that together to the ground, and I added the battery terminals on either side, and I didn't want this thing bouncing around in there, so I screwed it down to a little piece of wood, and I got some Velcro that's sticky, and I stuck a couple of pieces there. And one of the problems is that you have to stick it in such a way that the surface there is not smooth, it's rippled. So I stuck it on the bottom and on the back, and then I just pasted that thing in there and pressed hard, and that way it's all stuck in there. Again, I didn't want to drill any holes. Okay, so when you're running these cables to the fuses, the second battery that you just installed with that special positive connector already has a fuse in it, but on the other battery, the positive side goes to the inverter on the car. And so I got a fuse holder and a 100 amp fuse, both from Amazon. And I stuck, there's actually on mine, I have 2 cables because I have another cable going to set up for a 1 kilowatt inverter, but that's another story. And just to make sure the thing stayed shut, I put some electrical tape around it because otherwise it could pop open. All right, so here's my finished thing. I've got the positive side on the Prius battery, and then it's hard to see, and so I'm just showing you how the battery runs from the bottom of that fuse holder, and then I run it through the wheel well here. Sorry about the shaky video, but you can see that it's just laid into the spare tire well, and then it comes up out there. Okay, so how do you charge it? Well, one way you can charge it is with a solar panel. And so when I go camping, I just slap the solar panel across my windshield. And if I'm sitting at a lake and parked, I slap it across there. The solar panel works great. I hold it down with the wipers, or sometimes I just put it over the top. It generates about 26 volts of power. I got mine from Ames Power. It's a 120 watt panel. It folds up, and I got a controller. It's about $60 from Renogy or from Amazon. It's a waterproof controller, which I wanted. And then here's my wires. I put 15 amp fuses on those coming from the positive end, and I decided to use just normal plugs and sockets for my solar setup. And the reason for that is I can then use regular extension cords. And so I have a 25-foot extension cord. I have a 50-foot extension cord. I can combine them together and have 75 feet, so I can park my car in the shade and run the solar panel out into the sun. Okay, so how do we make the whole thing look nice-ish? Okay, so we've got the controller, and remember I mentioned something about the LED indicator and the plug at the bottom. Well, I got 13, you need about 13 feet of 16 gauge. I got black wire because it's going to be a ground wire. I actually bought 25 because I wasn't sure of how much I was going to need. And I got it again from Genuine Deals, so that it's marine grade. It's very high grade. You can get cheaper wire, 16 gauge wire from other places. Anyway, so you stick one lug onto the LED thing on the controller. Now you're going to run this wire from the back all the way up to the front, so you have this little indicator light. So where do you run it? You can run it from the back here. I made some fishing wires by taking some coat hangers and just straightening them out, and then I poke it in through here and it comes out on the other side. You have to fish around a little bit because it's a slight curve, and then you take the wire that is a grounded wire and tie it on there, and you're going to pull it into the back, and it's going to go underneath this little thing. Now, how do you get it under there? Well, you just poke, 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 and it'll go up there. There's a couple spots that are a little tricky, and you're going to run it all the way up to the front of the car. This is the front seat, and then around underneath the mat. And there are a number of places you could put the light. There's some empty places on the dashboard. I decided to go underneath and put it on this little empty socket. And so I ran it around there. Now, to get that panel off is a little tricky. If you have some sort of a little plastic tool, then you can go in there and start prying on it just enough so that you can get a putty knife in there, and then pry a little bit more, and then get your fingers on it and pull. That's really the best way of getting that thing off. Pull it from the top and it'll pop off. And this is what you'll see inside. Now, I have a recommendation. Don't use a screwdriver. I did, and what happened is that scratch. So just don't do that. Okay, so here's what you've got, and once you've got that open, you're going to use another fishing line to sort of poke around until you can come out down at the bottom and put your wire that you're feeding through onto that. I usually just wrap it with duct tape on there and then pull it gently through. So the next thing you need to do is get rid of the or pull out the little plug that's in there. And I didn't know how badly I was going to damage these things, and so when I was at the junkyard, I picked up a couple of them along with everything else. And you can see that the little tabs here you press on the inside. So once you get the panel open, it's real easy to pop out, but trying to pull it out without the panel open is going to be a real pain, and you'll probably wreck it. Okay, so here's your auxiliary port, cigarette lighter thing, whatever you want to call it. And this white thing you can squeeze and it'll pop off the back. And so then you've got it there. And I wired a 2 amp inline fuse to the positive wire. And what I'm going to do then is connect up a indicator light in the dash. And I got this from Blue Sea Systems. Actually, I got it from Amazon. And I decided to get a green one. You can also get a red one or an amber one, but I thought green was the most logical for me anyway, to show that I've paralleled the batteries. Now, it cost $6.25. from Amazon. Depending on the color, you can get these for about $3, and some places are selling them for like $40. So it's just crazy, the prices. Anyway, the red wire on this thing is going to connect to your positive. And one thing that you should pay attention to is the size of hole. When it says 11/64, that's really what you need to make, is 11/64. And I've read about some people making the hole a little bit too big and then the thing doesn't fit right. It just fits beautifully in an 11/64 hole. Okay, the red wire is the positive side, and you're going to connect this to the other end of your 2-amp inline fuse. And the yellow wire is the ground wire, and that is going to connect up with that line that goes all the way back to your Blue Sea charging relay. Okay, when you get the whole thing finished, hopefully it looks kind of neat. You can see my hole. I didn't drill the hole quite in the center, but I'm okay with that. All right, so here's the battery back in the back. Now, there is a slight problem, and that is the floorboard for the rear floor doesn't quite fit. It comes right across that line there and hits the corner. That's a big bummer. So I decided to go find another floorboard and just cut it to fit. Now, I didn't want to cut my original floorboard, so I figured I'd get a second floorboard. Now, the only tricky part about that is that they cost a lot, $440. I did find one dealer that had it on sale for $330. No way am I going to pay that to put in an extra floorboard. So what did I do? I went to my local junkyard and found one for $15. Yes. Okay. Now, I used a cardboard box for a template, and make sure that you got your corners lined up and just cut a little bit at a time until you get it just right, and then use the cardboard as a template on your back floorboard. And I used a hacksaw and chopped out that little notch, and there you go. Now, once you've got that new floorboard in, new old floorboard, then you can put your mat on top, and the mat is rubber on the back, so you can just flop it over and it will cover up things without shorting anything out, and you're all done. And you have an extra battery, an extra 12-volt battery in your Prius for running whatever you want. So, thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful for you. If you're interested in a solar setup for the Prius, I will post it here on YouTube when I get it done.